Awesome, let's get started then. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NOVA's March Research Symposium. Today's symposium is dedicated to highlighting the achievements of our students in our Fellowship for Innovation, Research, and Education program, also known as NOVA FIRE. We are super excited to see you all here today, and without further ado, let's get started. We'll start off by introducing ourselves. My name is Sachi Chan, and I am one of the co-founders and co-directors at NOVA. I'm also a second-year health sciences student at McMaster University.
Hi, everyone. My name is Imtisal. I'm also a co-founder and director at NOVA, and I'm also a second-year student. I'm studying biomedical engineering at Harvard.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea. I'm also a co-founder and director, and I'm also in second year in mechatronics engineering at Waterloo.
Before going into today's agenda and presentations, we want to lay some ground rules for today, just to ensure that everyone has a safe and enjoyable time. First off, please keep yourself muted at all times while people are presenting. You can feel free to mute yourself in the bottom left corner of your Zoom screen. If you would like to unmute and say something, please use the raised hand reaction in the reaction section or send a message in the chat, and then we will provide you with a cue to unmute. We encourage you to use the chat function throughout the day to ask questions. During the presentations, you can use the chat to ask questions either during or after the presentation. We also encourage the use of react buttons during the presentations. There's lots of them, like the clapping hands, the heart, thumbs up, and more. You may choose to turn your camera off or on. However, we will be recording this entire presentation, so make sure to take this into consideration. And we'll be sharing clips of this recording on our social media pages. If at any time during the presentation you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please message one of the directors. All three of us have the director in brackets in our Zoom names, or you may feel free to leave the room and then come back in.
So I'll go over the agenda for today. We'll start by doing some introductions and giving some details of this fellowship term, and then we'll go into the 4 projects for this year, with each team getting a chance to present their work from the past 5 months. Finally, we'll have a raffle and end off the symposium with some closing remarks.
Yeah, so we would like everyone to get excited for our raffle. You can enter using the link that I'm about to send in the chat for a chance to win a $25 gift card to a place of your choosing. All proceeds from the raffle will be going towards making next year's fellowship accessible for students, so make sure to check it out. And here is the link.
Look for it in the chat. Before we dive into presentations, we do want to introduce the fellowship program. NOVA FIRE stands for the Fellowship for Innovation, Research, and Education. It is the first virtual program hosted by NOVA, and we want to introduce the program to everyone who is learning about it for the first time. This year was our first year, and we saw lots of success. After receiving 75 applications from high school students all over Ontario, we select 24 of bright students to join our fellowship cohort. Once selected, these students were split up into 4 different research teams and spent the past 5 months working together to research and tackle some prominent global issues. On top of their research streams and team goals, fellows also had the chance to learn from mentors, professors, doctors, and STEM leaders. And every week of the fellowship, we had 7 mentors working with all 4 teams to provide them with guidance and experience in every aspect of their project. In addition, we hosted 6 workshops over these 5 months. Topics of the workshop range from statistical analysis, reading and writing scientific papers, deciphering misinformation, and having discussion on systemic bias in Canada. Finally, we also had 4 advisors from 2 companies that specifically helped with the music therapy and future of food stream to provide an expert perspective on their research.
The fellows joined us in November and started by learning how to conduct research in a critical and ethical manner. In December, they dove into their specialized streams and completed research packages to get more info on their topic. In January, they chose their research questions and began work on their specific projects, which continued into February, and finally in March, they put together these presentations for all of you.
Now I'm going to quickly introduce our different research fellowship streams. So as a refresher, this year's fellowship was made up of 4 different streams. The first one is music therapy to treat dementia patients using machine learning and EEG brainwave data to classify different music genres. Then we had the Canadian Indigenous Water Crisis stream. They analyzed the factors that have led to a lack of clean drinking water on Canadian Indigenous reserves. We also had a research group studying the effectiveness of standardized testing around the world, comparing education practices in the USA, India, and China, and how they affect their students. Lastly, we had the future of food technology, and they examined how vertical farming can effectively be integrated into Canadian agriculture.
So this is a little snapshot of all of our fellows wearing their bright red NOVA FIRE shirts. Today, we'll be starting off presentations with the Future of Food group, consisting of 6 team members. The Future of Food group consists of team members Emily, Alina, Abdullah, Daksh, Zaina, and Marwan. As food insecurity becomes more prominent through parts of Canada, the Hungry Hippos focuses on the viability of vertical farming, an uprising urban trend of reinventing the way we know conventional farming. Along with the presentation, the Hungry Hippos report addresses 5 topic categories in depth to educate their audience on the relevance of Canadian vertical farming. So the Hungry Hippos, feel free to share your screen and get started with your presentation.
So we'll be starting off with a little video we have to show you guys to kind of entail what our presentation will be about. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
All right. Enjoy some of the visuals.
Food security, and all of the other topics that come with it, all in a Canadian perspective. Now, what do we do about it? Vertical farming is more than an indoor garden. The focus is on plant growth optimization with controlled variables and uses soilless farming techniques like hydroponics, aquaponics, and aeroponics. These major topics, think about your community right now. Imagine old buildings being repurposed, school lunches created with producers from an urban farm. Think of how can vertical farming change your community?
Okay, so I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Oops. Okay, so hello everyone. We're the Hungry Hippos, and so that's our team name, and we are in the Future of Food stream. We decided to research vertical farming, more specifically its viability from a few different perspectives if it were to be implemented in Canada. So you've already seen the team. So before we proceed, we do want you guys to answer and ask any questions in the chat, and we'll answer them momentarily throughout the presentation. So, okay. Our research question is, will vertical farming be economically, socially, ecologically, and medically viable in Canada? And so as mentioned earlier, we will be looking at our topic, vertical farming, from all of these various lenses. So before we begin, we'd like to give you a brief explanation of what exactly vertical farming is. As said in the video, vertical farming is the practice of producing and stacking food on vertically inclined surfaces, often in urban buildings and such, and uses indoor farming techniques such as control of temperature, lighting, humidity, gas, and water, and soilless mixtures, which differs a lot from traditional farming as we know it. So now that you know a little bit more about our topic, we can start delving into our subtopics, which are listed here on the screen. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Dux and Abdullah, who will be covering the efficiency of vertical farming.
So one of the factors in determining the efficiency of vertical farming is actually the climate control technologies that are used. Climate control technologies for vertical farming are increasing every day, and these climate control technologies are very efficient and are feasible for Canadian environments. One way this is achieved is through the use of low-cost nanoclimate control for vertical farming. And for storing cold products, phase change materials, which could be as simple as just salt water, can provide thermal storage for cooling throughout the day. Onwards, there are many other climate control technologies that are being used and are being developed currently.
So not only is human error a major issue in current farming agricultural methods, human action in terms of government and legislation is equally a problem. So from a scientific perspective, conventional production methods are clearly unsustainable, as seen by the supply chains increasing the scarcity effect. And during the long process of things like harvesting, packaging, processing, and distribution, and all of this happens before actually reaching a consumer, there's several periods of time where crops can become spoiled, and this correlates to about 40% of total crops being ultimately wasted. In addition, to the future of the agricultural industry, it's heavily influenced by things like businesses and governments. So it's essential to consider how these factors would affect the agricultural industry. For instance, in the United States, the prices of corn bushels increased by 250% because of legislative laws that impact the production of said materials. And however, vertical farming can provide a solution to both of these problems, as it is less economically volatile and it's more scientifically sustainable. And another major factor to consider in terms of agriculture is water usage, because agriculture itself takes about 70% of the global water consumption. And companies such as Sky Greens use hydraulically powered vertical farming systems that have closed loop irrigation. And basically what this process does is it recycles and filters previously used water, so there's zero agricultural runoff and there's no risk of contamination. So looking at all these factors together, there's no doubt with such innovation, vertical farming could replace conventional farming soon.
For vertical farming, there is major potential for the introduction of new technologies. Though vertical farming technologies are still relatively new, they are crucial for some of the tasks that are required during farming. For example, the use of LED lights during crop growth the use of LED lights for crop growth are extremely efficient. And at companies such as Aero Farms, for example, they create specific light recipes for each plant. And this gives the greens the exact spectrum, intensity, and frequency they need for photosynthesis in the most energy efficient way possible. As well, new data systems are being developed to forecast and maximize plant growth. And this is done using cutting edge technology and machine learning.
This next section is all about the social and economic aspects of vertical farming, with the goal being to lessen socioeconomic inequalities in Canada. The implementation of vertical farming would bring about immense potential for new job opportunities in a variety of fields. These include agricultural jobs, but also include anything from engineering to programming to plumbing and construction. Implementing vertical farming in Canada will all but eliminate the labor outsourcing that comprises the majority of the Canadian food industry, redirecting these jobs instead to Canadian citizens, which will thus stimulate the Canadian economy. But new jobs aren't the only economic advantage that vertical farming may bring about. As you can see by these statistics, food insecurity is an increasingly concerning issue in Canada. Vertical farming can work to curtail these insecurities by reducing the costs to the food production industry, which will in turn reduce the cost to the consumer. First and foremost, the localization of our food production would mean lower transportation costs, as well as the elimination of any taxes and tariffs when importing food. And other economic advantages include the elimination of the need for farming equipment like fertilizers, herbicides, soil, and expensive vehicles like tractors and trucks. And there will also be no seasonality issues because continuous crop production can occur year-round, and costs will be lowered because of the protection from floods, droughts, and sun damage.
We are aware of the social divide some of us live through, but to others, it can be even affecting their food basic rights. The issue of food insecurity in Canada is understanding the difference between food availability and food accessibility, as many social barriers affect one pathways to gathering food, despite the abundance of food wealth Canada indulges in. In many local communities and neighborhoods, factors of lack of transportation, lack of funding, fear-mongering, and misinformation around organic or not, ethnicity differences, and employment opportunities are some of the surface level reasons of possible food insecurity in Canada, which mainly affect BIPOC and disability communities. With BIPOC and minority communities coming together through legal documentation processes, these communities are placing a focus on reducing the physical barriers to get to the food and putting local control into their hands to overcome this issue. With vertical farming having the largest advantage of localization, it can help build independent and locally run businesses, reinvent rundown buildings into something new and innovative, and create more inclusive workspaces in these farms.
Now I will talk about some ecological impacts. Ecological footprint is defined as the Earth's capability to renew the natural resources used by a population in a given year. Through vertical farming, our ecological footprint can be reduced. Vertical farming uses up to 95% less water than traditional farming, and less energy is needed to pump the water around. This results in reduced release of greenhouse gases and less water pollution. During traditional farming, harmful chemicals such as pesticides are washed up with the soil into nearby water bodies. As a result, the water is polluted and organisms in the water are harmed. With vertical farming, there is little to no harmful chemicals needed, which includes pesticides and herbicides. Currently, crops travel a large distance from the farm to the consumer. With the use of vertical farming, workers will be able to transport food in a fraction of the distance. Also, vertical farming makes the use of tractors and other farm equipment obsolete, eliminating pollutants from such machinery. Unfortunately, since vertical farming is done indoors, it uses more energy for lighting. Nevertheless, vertical farms use LED lights, which reduce the amount of energy needed. As vertical farming technologies improve, the use of electricity will be reduced even further. One example of such advancements is through the use of solar panels. In conclusion, vertical farming can effectively lower our ecological footprint by reducing the amount of water and energy used, as well as the transportation distance.
Okay, so in terms of the benefits vertically farmed crops can have on our health, it's not really the fact that they're grown in vertical farms, but rather that they will be able to produce more of these crops closer to home, meaning that less time will be wasted in between destinations and for storage and distribution, so that the crops can get to our plates faster. And so this improves nutritional value of vertically grown crops, as leafy greens like spinach and lettuce can actually lose vitamins and minerals within the first few days of harvest. And so the statistic on the screen is that certain leafy greens like spinach and lettuce lose up to 61% of their nutrients within the first 8 days of harvest. And so we can obviously see why this time wasted is such an issue and how vertical farming can solve the problem. Okay. One of the risks associated with consuming vertically grown crops is that they use artificial light sources, so LED and HID lights. And studies have shown that these lights can increase levels of nitrogen in plants. And for any chemistry nerds out there like myself, we know that high levels of nitrogen means that the element is more susceptible to forming carcinogenic compounds. And for any of you who don't know what that means, carcinogens are cancer-causing substances. But then again, there's a lot of fear-mongering surrounding this topic. You know, so many parts of our diets already include so many carcinogens, and the one that's most popular that I've seen is caffeine. So that's in a lot of what we eat. So that should put things into perspective for you.
While our presentation has aimed to cover every broad of the spectrum for vertical farming, the viability of vertical farming in Canada is just not conclusive just yet, despite the good news. There needs to be more research conducted when covering the topics of vertical farming, as evidence is not enough from personal experience to make a strong enough conclusion. However, there are promising strides to the advancement of vertical farming, though they may take a while before the full implementation of the operation. We hope our presentation has empowered you with the knowledge to understand the local barriers and solutions made in your community.
So that concludes our presentation. Please don't forget to check out our report on this topic, which will be posted on the NOVA FIRE website shortly. And before we open the floor to questions, we just wanted to give a huge shout out to our mentor, Ava, who helped us so much along this process. And also our friend Tyler from ZipGrow for giving us a sort of like experts, insider's view on vertical farming. And finally, thank you so much to the NOVA directors for giving us this amazing opportunity. And now we will open the floor to questions.
Thank you so much, guys. That was so great. Honestly, I want to get one of those farms in my future house now. So yeah, we'll open up the floor to any questions. If anyone would like to unmute and ask a question, you can use the react button and raise your hand, or feel free to ask questions directly in the chat and it will be addressed by this group. I actually had a question, so I'm just going to unmute and ask. So I know your report and your research focused on vertical farming in Canada and the future of food in Canada. While you guys were researching, did you see this sort of farming style take off in any other countries that you know of?
When I was researching the economics, I found a study from South Africa, which was looking at households that had these vertical, like urban agriculture in their houses. So it wasn't specifically the industry of vertical farming, but it was households that had it themselves. They were doing it themselves, and it showed that it drastically reduced their food costs because they were making it themselves, and it resulted in a higher discretionary income for the households.
So like,
yeah, I can attest to that. A lot of our information for the report, at least, was actually from other country sources since they had more experience of using vertical farming and such. Like even like a certain type of soil mixture, soilless mixture called aeroponics was actually developed by NASA originally because they were supposed to grow plants in space. So then that kind of took off into just kind of like general urban farming, and that kind of stuff is just pretty cool to figure out of like how things came to be. So there's a lot of places that have utilized vertical farming, especially in places where they want to repopulate a certain city to be more purposeful with its localization of businesses.
that's super cool. Thank you.
I think there's a question in the chat if you guys want to address it.
Yeah, so while I was researching the economics of it, I found that the biggest challenge by far was the upfront costs for building any vertical farms, especially like, for example, in big cities, it would be the land cost, but also the energy costs. So in developing cities, they would need a big boost, maybe from like the government had to give a big boost, but over time, the long-term return on investment is high. So yeah.
Yeah, in terms of technology that would be useful, it kind of just depends on whatever the company's kind of working with, because with a lot of these setups of making these vertical plants, they kind of are just depending on what they have with mixtures, for example. So since they can't use soil, they use different types of mixtures to make up that medium to hold the plants, because these plants need like a root system to support itself and grow, grow nice and tall. So that's why they need stuff like mixture costs and stuff like that. So if they have available mixtures for that, they'll use it. They meet also the regulations for nutrition and stuff like that. So that's probably the most technology they would need, plus also just the actual buildings to help stack with it. There's also this whole lighting system. So that's kind of the main aspects for technology in vertical farming.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to my peers, like in terms of developing nations, I saw a lot of research about this. So vertical farming is really popular in areas where the climate is very humid and it's very difficult to farm traditionally. So vertical farming offers a more viable alternative.
Awesome. If anyone else has questions, I mean, you can send them in the chat, and if not, we can move on. Thank you guys for that presentation. That was awesome. Okay, so now we will have the group that is researching standardized testing present, also known as Testing 123. Testing, and the group is composed of Natalie, Lana, Serby, Stephen, and Richard. So Testing 123 has been researching the extent of cultural impacts on post-secondary admission testing within America, China, and India. They also have looked at the impacts and evolution of current standardized testing systems in these countries and their roots in each country's educational values and goals. So whenever you guys are ready, you can screen share.
Perfect. Could I get a confirmation that our slides are visual?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so we'll get us started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lana, and we are team testing 123 as part of the standardized testing stream. So for us, our focus was really standardized testing as seen in the US, China, and India. In today's presentation, we're going to be doing some quick introductions for ourselves, talking a little bit about our research questions, some key comparisons that we made, and then opening up the floor for any questions that you might have throughout the presentation. So my name is Lana.
I'm Natalie.
I'm Serby.
I'm Stephen.
And I'm Richard.
And together we're team testing 123.
So as for what our research questions are, we decided to take two different avenues. The first one being, what is the extent of educational values and the goals of the countries themselves? And how are they integrated into their standardized testing system, more specifically into their post-secondary admission testing? The second stream that we decided to research talked about how standardized tests evolve in terms of content, administration, and their impact on post-secondary admissions on a global level. So as for why we chose China, India, and the US as our countries, we'll have to look at their population size, which allowed us to have a really big sample size in terms of when looking at the research that was put together for them, including their GDP, which is quite varied between three countries, which allows for a nice variable to compare certain aspects to, and the testing outreach was very different in these three countries as well. And the varied government involvement also was a nice variable to look at.
Now, we'll be going over the background on each system, like the general gist of each country's standardized testing system. Specifically, we're going to be looking at the content of each standardized test, the influence of the government on them, and their significance, specifically for post-secondary admissions in each country.
So to begin with, for the United States, the main standardized test is the SAT, which stands for the Scholastic Assessment Test, that is typically taken in grade 11 or 12. It is referred to as a multiple choice critical thinking test, and it consists of two mandatory sections, one of which focuses on evidence-based reading and writing, while the other focuses more on mathematics. There's also an optional essay section, which is being discontinued as of June of this year. So it is created and distributed by the College Board, a nonprofit organization, so it is not under the direct jurisdiction of the United States. And in terms of the significance of the test on post-secondary admissions, we can see that it has a very strong influence, although it is typically secondary to high school GPAs and also supported by other factors such as extracurriculars, references, and other criteria.
So in China, the Gaokao is the main test. There is only one test, and that's the Gaokao. So the Gaokao is a 2-day, 9-hour test in which students take a variety of sections, either on English, math, sciences, the humanities, etc. And in terms of admissions, the Gaokao is the admission policy. So whatever score the student gets, that determines if they get into a first tier, second tier, or third tier university. They don't look at high school GPAs, extracurriculars, or anything else like seen in India and the US. So the Gaokao is the government is very heavily involved in Gaokao distribution and creation. Because they're the ones who create the test. And because it's the only factor in admissions, the Gaokao is viewed as a tool of social mobility, meaning that if a very poor family in a rural area, if one of their children does extremely well on a Gaokao, that can cause them to go to a great university and create a better life for them and their family.
So for India, standardized testing comes in the form of board exams, which students take in grade 10 and 12. So board exams usually cover 5 to 6 subjects, including Hindi, English, local languages, mathematics, the sciences, and social sciences. Each course a student is taking in high school has its own board exam, for example, for chemistry. And students take the board exams of the courses that they've gone through in that given year. Board exams are created by the individual education boards in India, which operate either at the state or the federal level. They may also be public or privately owned. Students take the board exams of the education board that their school belongs to. So for grade 10 board exams, Their scores determine which school a student goes to for grade 11, as admissions to grade 11 are very competitive. Grade 12 board exam scores, alongside the scores on the individual entrance exams of each university, are the determinants of university admissions in India.
So next up, we're going to be talking about some of the major trends in testing between all three countries. Specifically, we'll be focusing on the significance of standardized testing within each country, as in are countries moving towards or away from testing in terms of emphasizing them, and also how the content has been shifting to meet new standards and new requirements, both in terms of preparing students for the 21st century and for ensuring that they are holistic, well-rounded tests.
Now, in terms of the recent changes in admissions, the United States and India are reducing the importance of standardized testing in university admissions. In the United States, it's a gradual shift by universities to place less weight on SAT scores for admissions or remove the need for SAT scores altogether. During the 2018 to 2019 school year, 45.7% of US universities placed considerable importance on SAT scores, compared to 60% of US universities in 2006. In India, the government is trying to make university admissions a more holistic process by incorporating subject portfolios and having universities look at a student's quote-unquote individualized interests and talents when determining admissions, according to the Indian government's National Education Policy 2020, which sets out a bunch of different goals for the education system, among them exam reform. However, the Chinese government is continuing with the system of having the Gaokao be the only thing that determines university admissions. The government, though there have been some changes, the government has increased quotas in minority provinces such as Tibet, making it easier for ethnic minorities to get into top universities. Furthermore, the government has adjusted the amount of people admitted to top universities based on the percentage of population present in the province. This has spurred a concept known as Gaokao migration, where parents move their children to another province for the last year of high school to increase their chances of getting into a tier 1 university, the best universities in China. Now, in terms of changes in content, the United States and India, I apologize. I have an ulcer on my tongue. It's irritating. The United States and India are also trying to make their standardized tests focus more on competency-based testing a student's ability to apply the relevant skills for their subjects on the test, as opposed to being knowledge-based and focused on memorizing facts. In March 2016, the College Board released a new version of the SAT, which replaced the preceding version from 2005. This 2016 version, instead of testing a student's knowledge of a word's precise definition with absolutely no context or like their vocabulary, it focuses on the student's ability to understand words in the context of a whole sentence or paragraph. For India, the Indian government's National Education Policy 2020 stipulates that board exams will shift away from primarily testing a student's ability to memorize a large volume of facts to testing a student's ability to apply the relevant skills in the subjects they've learned. Like, for example, being able to solve a math problem. Now, in China, there's not really been much change at all, aside from each province now having its own version of the Gaokao tailored to its quality of education. But more significantly, China is now significantly increasing the pressure put on students to study for the Gaokao by reducing the amount of assessments outside the Gaokao, so students spend more time preparing for the Gaokao.
So the necessity for reforms in the standardized testing system in all three countries were largely driven by large socioeconomic divides within the society. So the ultimate goal of all the tests would be so that it acts as a function of social mobility rather than something that enforces poverty in these societies. Although the testing systems are they're rapidly modifying to suit a new world, each country is beginning to understand the importance of independent thinking, especially present within their tests. So as a result, all three tests are turning towards a more comprehension-based questions rather than memorization, and this is seen with varying levels of extremity.
So in China, it's very clear that the country is moving more and more towards increased pressure placed on the Gaokao, whereas in the USA, Universities are not only generally reducing the importance of the SAT in admissions, but many are also removing the SAT as a factor in admissions altogether. India balances the two perspectives, trying to significantly reform its board exams to be less stressful and prepare students better for 21st century jobs, but still requiring them for admissions. Most importantly, as the educational systems of these countries continue to evolve, the overarching goal that these standardized testing systems will prepare students for a future world cannot be lost. For more detailed information and for access to our full research paper, please check out the NOVA X Network website, where you can find the entirety of our 5-month project. A huge thank you to Lucas Chu, our mentor, for helping us with every step of our project, and the NOVA Networks for providing us with this incredible opportunity. We will now be open to any questions that you might have.
That was a great presentation, guys. I actually had a question. So did you guys look at any studies to compare test scores to future either post-secondary or career-related success? And are there any correlations between those two?
I think each country has its own definition of those correlations. So for example, within the US, the correlations were much less distinct, simply because there are so many other factors that are taken into consideration within admissions outside of the SAT scores, such as HS high school GPA, such as extracurriculars and the like. And someone else can take over and speak for the other countries.
I can speak for China. In China, I read a paper about it, and I don't remember exactly the stats, but they found that the students who actually did the best on the test, in China, they have a system that if you did the best in your province, you'll get on national TV, and it's a big thing. So they followed these students into their post-secondary lives outside of university. And they found that they didn't actually have that much career success, because the Gaokao is so heavily based on memorization. So I think especially in China, career success and Gaokao scores, there's not really much of a correlation between the two, albeit the best students who do score the best on the test will get into the best universities.
Thanks,
for
that's
India,
really interesting. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I could add about India. India is a little bit similar to China in that the test scores didn't have too much relationship with the success in like the job market, because they had some studies that showed that compared to like on a global level, India graduates had a much harder time finding a job, and they also demonstrated that they were lacking a lot of key skills that are required in the workplace.
All right, so we've got another question from Alyssa, who asks, I am wondering how secondary schools, high schools in the US and India are responding to the changes of the value placed upon standardized testing. So from my research within the US, I haven't seen any specific changes in terms of less significance placed upon the SAT and how that's affected curriculum, simply because that significance, especially spurred by the pandemic, has only just now started to decrease, although it's been a slowly growing trend. So in terms of the US, there haven't been any significant changes in curriculum to high school curriculum that respond specifically to the devaluation of the SAT.
And I can speak for India. So as we saw in the presentation, India is also undergoing some pretty drastic changes. However, these changes came into effect just last year in 2020. So they had these huge reforms to their education policy. And as of right now, they haven't really implemented many of these changes. So we don't actually know how the education system is really responding to any changes. So right now it's just more of a drafted policy.
All right, next up, we've got Jen, who asks, could you discuss some of the mechanisms by which socioeconomic status affects performance on these standardized tests? So within the US, actually, there is a very big disparity between African Americans and between white students in terms of performance. I believe the stat is that there can be a difference of as much as 240 points between those of the same house socioeconomic status. And we can see that there's been steps made to address that, especially with the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, which served to amend some of the issues that were a result of the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001, specifically the punishment of lower socioeconomic schools and that entire system that resulted in those difficulties only being exacerbated since they were not given opportunity to amend themselves or given the necessary resources and funding to address those disparities.
Right, so I can speak for China on that question. Basically, China has put together, as I'm sure that Natalie's already talked about in the presentation, but they've put together some quotas and stuff to make sure that, there's programs to help in the Gaokao in rural areas as well as in urban areas. However, like always, there's always going to be some disparity between those of a richer household and a poorer household. But China's been doing pretty well on trying to equal that sort of.
Sorry, could I just clarify my question? I don't know if it was clear. Great presentation, by the way. I don't know if you can see me. Hold on. Great presentation for both groups. I just wanted to ask, so you mentioned, the disparities, the socioeconomic disparities in all the countries, but I was just wondering why they occur. So is it because of the lack of resources put into preparing students for the tests? Or is it, other things? So if you could just discuss that a little bit, that would be awesome.
All right, so particularly within the US, we see that a lot of these issues occur specifically because there is a lack of funding and a lack of resources provided to lower socioeconomic areas and to those specific schools. That is where most of the research tends to happen, and that is where most of my research has led me to believe most of those issues stem from. I haven't seen much else in regards to differences in terms of any other criteria.
So just for China, it's mainly because there are so many different curriculums all over like the states and the boards in the country. Whether that be because of like rural areas and urban areas and like different qualities of education. While these boards don't have that much autonomy over like what's tested in the Gaokao, that's a very like federal thing. Nothing is changed about it by like ministers and everything. So that's where that disparity comes, because it's found that the curriculum in communities that have a lower average income are found to be less thorough than those that have a higher average income.
Well, for India, it's kind of similar. It's like if you're rich, you can go to a really good private school, then ace your board exams, and aside from that, you can also get like coaching classes, which go on for like months and months in preparation for board exams. Well, if you're poor, well, you don't have access to that. And that's not to mention the varying qualities of private schools and tutoring services in India. So if you're poor and you can't afford like a decent private school, because public schools in India, especially in like rural areas, a lot of the times their quality is it's not consistent, to say the least. So it's quite important that you get the tutoring supplement. But if you're poor, you're not going to be able to get tutoring or half decent schools. So if you're poor, you're not going to do so well on the board exams for that reason.
All right, thank you. If there are no other questions, then that very much concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for your time.
That was amazing. Thank you guys so much. I think Chelsea, if you're here, I can't see anyone, but you're going to introduce the next group?
Yeah, do you want to go to the next slide? Awesome. So the next group presenting is a music therapy group called the Brainy Bunch. And they're comprised of Anushe, Cindy, Fez, Marison, Aaron, and Thomas. So the Brainy Bunch has developed a technical solution to the widespread problems surrounding inaccessibility with music therapy for Canadian dementia patients. Using a portable EEG device, the NOVA tool allows patients to listen to a pre-made playlist of songs, and through an analysis of brainwave patterns, discover the effect of each song on the individual. Using this analysis and the Spotify API, the NOVA tool suggests similar songs, which the model predicts will improve the effectiveness of music therapy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to watch us today. My group and I, the Brainy Bunch, have been working really hard on this project for the past few months, and we're really excited to share it with you.
So we'll just begin with some introductions. My name's Aaron Leo. I'm a grade 12 student from Markham, and I focused on the back end as a member of the tech team.
Hi everyone, my name is Cindy He. I'm a grade 12 student from Toronto, Ontario, and I focused on the front end of our product on the tech team.
Hi, my name is Mirison. I'm a grade 11 student from London.
And I'm part of the science team.
Hi, my name is Fez. I'm in grade 11 and I'm also part of the science team, and I'm from Mississauga.
Hi, I'm Anusha. I'm in grade 9 and I'm also from Mississauga and I'm part of the science team.
So what do we end up building? Well, so we created an app that reads EEG signals while dementia patients are listening to music. So it would use a kind of mathematical algorithm, and it would convert these signals to emotions. Then it would decide which songs are most beneficial to the patient for their therapy. And then finally, it would find similar songs that would supplement the music therapy process based on similarities in audio features, such as rhythm and tempo. So you might ask, how do we do this? Well, this presentation will go over all the steps we took from the conception of the idea to the final product.
All right, to start off on the research side, we started off by researching what is dementia. Dementia isn't a single disease. It covers a wide range of medical conditions, for instance, Alzheimer's, and 11% of people over 65 have dementia. Dementia is caused by damage to brain cells, which interferes with their ability to communicate with one another. When brain cells cannot communicate normally, thinking, behavior, and feelings can be affected. These changes trigger a decline in thinking skills, which can affect the day-to-day lives of people. Signs of dementia can include problems with short-term memory, keeping track of items, and behavioral changes. And now we'll talk a little bit about the music therapy process. There are 3 basic steps to the music therapy process. The first step is for the music therapist to meet and communicate with their patient. During this time, the music therapist may talk and observe the patient. Once the therapist has a general idea of the specific needs and interests of the patient, they can then draft up a plan of action. So a combination of instruments, singing, and listening is used during these sessions. They will continually monitor, chart, and share the progress of their patient, working with family and doctors along the way. The music therapist ensures that they are on track to reach their patient's medical goals.
When conducting our research, we decided to focus on 3 main topics, starting off with brainwaves and the activity in the brain. We then transitioned to different types of music and what emotions they can evoke from different people. And finally, memory and how it is impacted through the process of dementia.
So brainwaves are when neurons in the brains are activated and produce electrical impulses, and the synchronized activity is technically what a brainwave is. There are 5 types of brainwaves: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta, but we mainly focused on researching beta and alpha as they are the ones that occur in a normal, relaxed state of mind. Brainwaves tell us the difference in the emotions the person is going through, not the actual emotion itself. And the most significant piece of research we found regarding emotions and brainwave data is on the chart on the screen. The chart basically tells us that when a person is happy, that their alpha waves are higher than when they are sad.
When looking at the different types of music, we had many different things to consider. The main thing that we had to look at was the language. So both the language that the patient speaks, as well as the language of the song. When we transitioned into different time periods, through our research, we found out that memories are more prevalent from different times in our lives. So through knowing that, we had to target those time periods. When looking at the different parts of the song, the chorus was the most remembered and evokes the strongest memories. So that was the part of the song that we often targeted. And finally, when looking at the genre, it wasn't always the favorite genre of the patient. Oftentimes it was rap, hip hop, or country music due to their upbeat sounds. When talking about dementia, you have to consider memory and how it's impacted throughout the disease. For example, personal experiences. If someone gets married to one song and another person gets in a car accident while listening to it, if that song is played again in the future, they can have very different emotional reactions. As I said before, the chorus of the song tends to evoke the strongest of those emotions. When we were looking into when memories were the most prevalent, it tended to range from 18 to 25 years old, and knowing that, we targeted music from those periods in their lives. Finally, when choosing music, rhythm accounts for 42% of the emotional reaction, so we had to keep that in mind to choose appropriate songs.
So we know that music and dementia have a huge impact on the brain's functions, and dementia tends to hinder the ability brain cells have when they interact with one another. So this can affect many basic brain functions, such as thinking, memory, and communication. And our hope is that with music, through music therapy, can help mend these missing functions.
And so now moving on to the technology side of our project. So after all of that research, we decided to create a web app that analyzes data from a headset and suggests songs for a music therapist to use during music therapy. So our app is not replacing music therapists, but it is supplementary. It is supplementing the music therapy that the music therapists are providing. And this is to bridge the gap between the art of therapy and music with technology to support the music therapists that are lacking this support from technology, because nothing similar to this is existing in the field of music therapy right now. So this does mean that we are creating something new, and that's very exciting, but unfortunately that does mean we had to do a lot more research and a lot of extra steps that we had to take.
So going back to Fez, what Fez mentioned at the beginning, the web app is fairly simple to navigate. So user is first directed to a home page, which presents a login or sign up option. Once logged in, the user may select one of 7 languages before taking a short assessment. So then the individual is asked to put on a headset, which will be used to analyze brainwave activity during the assessment. The assessment in itself presents various styles, genres, and types of music to the listener while analyzing emotional response through the headset. So once this is completed, a list of songs which were found to have a positive effect from a neurological standpoint is generated and may be used as a reference for music therapists.
And to talk about how exactly we created this, so Marison and I, we worked on the front end using React and Firebase, and we started with pretty much no experience at all. And just to briefly explain what these two things are, so React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, so in our case, the web app, and it is actually one of the most popular user interface design libraries. So everything that you've seen on our previous slide that Marison just walked you through is being built using React.
Great. And then another platform we used to build the web app was also Firebase.
All right, so Marison and Cindy have walked you through the beautiful front end they designed, but now it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of what actually happens when you put on that portable EEG device. So as Fez mentioned at the very beginning, a dementia patient will be listening to a pre-made playlist, wearing their portable EEG device, much like the one, my virtual background hides it, but much like the one I'm holding here. So what happens is the EEG signals are collected through this headset, and using a mathematical algorithm called a fast Fourier transform, they convert those numbers essentially. Well, I'll show you what they look like in a little bit, but they convert this long sheet of numbers, which are signals from the EEG device, and it calculates an emotion like you see on the screen. So once we calculate that emotion, we connect the emotion that's being felt to the song being played. And by determining which songs are most beneficial or evoke the most positive or happy responses, we use the Spotify API. We search the Spotify API using audio features like rhythm and tempo, which are similar to the songs that evoked a positive emotion. Once we get this API response, we post it onto our front end, as you can see at the bottom right of the screen. And finally, the music therapist gets to choose filter songs, the songs that appear using year, genre, language, and other filters, and they get to choose and pick which songs to play for the dementia patient. So moving on, I just want to show you what the EEG output actually looks like. So what we had to work with. So this long string of numbers is it's what's given to us. So this is what we start with. We need to conducted calculations on these, and ultimately we used these to find out how a person was feeling, the emotion that was being evoked by a particular song. So Thomas, if you move forward, we'll see, I'll explain the various technologies that I used. So the whole tech team used GitHub in the top left. It's a version control platform. It allows us to collaborate and ensure that we're all using updated versions of our code. In the top middle, it's probably the most recognizable programming icon is Python. Almost the entire backend was built with Python, with the exception of a few components. In the top right and bottom middle are visual depictions of the calculations that we used. The bottom middle is the fast Fourier transform. I'm not going to explain what it is. It's just really complex. We don't have time. And then finally, API technology, the APIs that we used. We used APIs to send data from the headset to our computers, and then send the data that we collect from our computers to Spotify, and then return that. And that's what essentially what the function of an API is. So now I pre-recorded a little bit of a demo of how exactly the backend is going to work. So Thomas, feel free to play that when you're ready. Hey everyone, I know you've been listening to me speak live for the past few minutes, but here's a recorded message about how exactly our model's going to work. So I've been listening to some of my favorite music for the past few minutes while wearing my emotive headset, and it's going to suggest similar songs that it believes will benefit my treatment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to my code. I'm going to press this little play button up here. We're going to see the server open. I'm going to copy the link that's down here. I'm going to paste it, and we're going to see a list of songs that the model predicts will benefit my therapy. The first being Throw It on the Floor by Sister Soul. Now we know this is messy output, but it'll actually be put onto the nice, beautiful front end that Cindy and Marison showed you guys previously. I hope you've enjoyed this demo. Thank you guys. Alrighty, so that concludes, before we conclude our presentation, just what's next. So we haven't actually had time to connect the front end to the back end. It's a really laborious task, and there are a lot of different components that we have to combine, specifically because they were developed separately. And also we want to scale this into a usable product for music therapists around Canada. To do that, there are several components, including clinical trials that we hope to conduct in the coming months. But anyway, that concludes our presentation. Just before we end off, I'd like to give a huge shout out to both Anne and Isabel Abunitala, who supported us throughout this entire journey, and with the science team, and Isabel with her endless technical support. We'd like to thank the directors, specifically Chelsea, for her prolonged technical support as well. And finally, we'd like to thank all of you for coming to our presentation today. We hope you've enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them now.
Thank you guys so much. That was really great. Yeah, we'll pass it on to the rest of the audience if they want to ask any questions. Looks like you guys are getting some very positive reactions right now. But yeah, anyone can ask any questions, whether it's more on the tech side, more on the science side. I think, yeah, their team's split up so they know how to kind of address different types of questions. I saw Tiffany put up her hand. So Tiffany, does that mean you want to unmute?
Yes. I had a question. I think your product is super cool. I think it'll definitely benefit music therapists in the future. Do you think you can see your product working with other types of other patients, so not just dementia patients?
Of course. There's no part of the technology that's designed specifically for dementia patients, but dementia patients are the most common patients for music therapists, so that's why we explored that route. But of course, this can be used for anyone. There are a few projections in the future. There are a few headphone companies that are actually starting research on these types of devices, that when you listen to a certain song, it actually projects live feedback and tells you whether it's beneficial for focus or not. But that's in the early stages of development. So of course, anybody can use something like this.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for that presentation. That was awesome. As you can see from the feedback you're getting in the chat. So yeah, we can move on to the next group. Yep, what do me? Oh, did I accidentally can you guys see my screen and hear me all right? Yep.
Okay, awesome. So we're now wrapping up with our fourth and final team of the day. This team will be the research stream that focused on the Canadian Indigenous Water Crisis, also known as the Water Warriors. This team consists of 6 students, including Tia, Quinn, Ruby, Dana, Charmy, and Ariba. So the Water Warriors have actually created a website and an Instagram page that includes research, information, and a way to make donations in order to raise awareness and spread knowledge about the Canadian Indigenous Water Crisis. And I think Installer Chelsea will send the links to both of those sites in the chat. So I'll pass it on to the Water Warriors now. Feel free to share your presentation.
All right, and can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. We are so glad you are here. Today, we will be talking about the Canadian Indigenous Water Crisis. But before we go forward, we want to introduce ourselves. My name is Ariba Anwar. I'm a grade 11 student based in Mississauga, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Ruby Curry. I'm a grade 10 student and I'm from Toronto, Ontario.
My name's Quinn. I'm a grade 12 student from Toronto, Ontario.
Hello everyone, my name is Charmy and I'm a grade 10 student from Oakville.
Hi, I'm Dana and I'm from Merchant Hill and I'm in grade 12.
My name's Tia and I'm a grade 10 student from Niagara Falls, and we are the Water Warriors. Yeah, so our mission is we are a team of 6 high school students who are connected through Nova X Network's Research Fellowship. We've been working together since November on a unanimous goal, which is to raise awareness for the Canadian Indigenous Water Crisis. So a little bit of background, the Canadian Indigenous Water Crisis is an ongoing nationwide emergency that prohibits Indigenous communities from access to clean drinking water. These communities are facing third world conditions in a water-rich country. Residents are forced to boil their water, buy large volumes of expensive bottled water, and retrieve water from open sources. This is a result of unsafe tap water that cannot be consumed, as more than half of the water systems pose medium to high health risk and have water advisories issued to their communities. This crisis contradicts the ample water supply that non-Indigenous Canadian citizens have access to daily. The Canadian government is failing to take sufficient action in resolving this ongoing issue that impacts a growing 5% of the population. As a first world country that prides itself on having the world's 3rd largest per capita freshwater reserve, Indigenous people are not only facing lack of a human right, but discrimination as well. After establishing our common goals, we set off on countless hours of researching, networking, getting feedback, learning, and planning before deciding on the embodiment of our fellowship project, a website that will act as a hub for the water crisis, where information can be shared and spread, donations can be made, and the first step of our communal goal can be put into action. Overall, we feel a strong global responsibility to be the change in solving this ongoing national emergency, and after listening to our presentation, we hope you will choose to be a part of the solution too. We are very thankful for NOVA for connecting us to 3 different mentors. Ellie is a member of the Santu Urku Kichwa community on the Napo River in the Ecuadorian Amazon. She is an artist and scientist interested in the work at the intersection of humans and the environment. Azteca is a multidisciplinary futurist artist from Houston, Texas. Their focus is at the intersection of computer programming and choreography. Jamin was raised in the Treaty 6 territory on the Beardies and Okimasa Willow Cree Nation, Saskatchewan. His primary research interests are Indigenous health, governance, literature, numbered treaties, and Canadian politics. All of our mentors have helped us with our research journey in the process of dealing with Indigenous perspectives and teaching us their perspectives, teaching ethical issues, assistance in contacting Indigenous communities. We cannot thank them enough, and it would not be possible for us to be here without them.
So now that everyone is aware of the current crisis, here are some important things that we need to look at before going forward. So there are 3 types of drinking water advisories. First is boil water. Second is do not consume. And third is do not use. And long-term advisories tell us that the advisory has been in place for over 12 months. So currently there are 58 long-term drinking water advisories in 38 communities across Canada.
So we started our independent research in January of 2021, and we focused mainly on 4 major research questions when conducting our research. The first was, what are water advisories and what do they have to do with water quality? The second was, what are the most critical points to bring forward when it comes to the Indigenous water crisis in Canada? The third was, who monitors water quality in Indigenous communities? And the fourth is, why is the federal government responsible for addressing this issue in Indigenous communities?
Yeah, so out of all of our findings, the 3 major findings that surprised us the most include abuse of power, the destruction caused by water bottle companies, and contamination by industrialization.
Abuse of power, specifically by the Canadian government, has led to the use of residential schools. These residential schools have caused intergenerational trauma, which have affected First Nations people for a while now, and especially since the last residential school closed only in 1996, they are definitely still affecting communities to this day. Also, the normalization of the lack of the government's involvement is bad too, and the continuation of broken promises, specifically the deadline Justin Trudeau made to end all boiled water advisories by 2021, of March 2021, which he has broken.
So water bottle companies such as Nestle, which is the biggest one, take advantage of Canada's water supply, even taking water from Indigenous communities. It's hard to get funding to prevent these companies from essentially buying water from people who need it, and there's no accountability, and these companies make a lot of profit off our water. There is also a general lack of awareness about this issue, which in turn causes the companies to continuously profit.
Also, contamination by industrialization is a huge factor that affects Indigenous communities across Canada. Some specific examples of contamination includes mine waste, mercury dumping, air pollution, and arsenic trioxide, which can cause So our primary purpose for developing the Canadian Water Crisis website is to create a platform which informs the public about the root causes of the water crisis, the impact it has had on Indigenous communities, and the importance of taking action.
Our landing page, Home, will guide visitors to 4 vital sections of the website: Learn, About Us, Voices, and Donate Now.
The Learn page also includes fundamental information regarding what a water advisory means and the 3 predominant types which numerous Indigenous communities are impacted by.
The About Us section provides visitors with information on who we are, our mission statement, and our partners, NOVA and Water First.
Our plan for the Voices section is to publish 3 major articles about contamination by industrialization, exploitation by water bottle companies, and abuse of power. Furthermore, we will be including interviews we have conducted with members of Indigenous communities in order to share an authentic perspective.
So along with our website, we wanted to have a social media as well, because it's in today's day and age, it's a very effective way of sharing information and educating people, especially young people. So here we have a few of our posts that we've already made, and we try to make them as simple as possible. So we have posts specific to the water crisis, as well as content that is there to educate people on just Indigenous issues. Example, land acknowledgements. We also have a link tree, which provides links to various resources for people to go do their own research, as well as our own website and places to donate. So if you'd like to follow us, our @ is Water Warriors Project.
All right, and after months of dedicated work and research, we are proud to announce our partnership with Water First. Water First is an NGO dedicated to help address water challenges in Indigenous communities in Canada through education, training, and meaningful collaboration. We are working closely with them, especially for any donations and to learn more. And as Dana said before about our social media, this is just a screenshot of our Instagram followers first few days into our Instagram being live, and it just shows that over a short period of time we can gain a good amount of following. And just looking at our insights and statistics, we want to continue these numbers as we go forward to keep educating, especially teens and in the ages from like high school, like middle school to high school, to keep educating them about what the water crisis is, and just continue that as a big part of our project as well. And as we become independent from NOVA, we are going to be seeking more partnerships like Water First, and we want to build meaningful connections with Indigenous communities and interview Indigenous people on the impact they've had with the impact that the water crisis has had on them. And with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you to the NOVA directors for bringing us together. Thank you to our mentors, Ellie, Azteca, and Jamin, Water First, and Aquafilms for helping us through this whole process. Follow our Instagram using the QR code, and Quinn will put it in the chat again. And this leads us into any questions.
Awesome presentation, guys. I had a question on, it's kind of a broad question on the future partnership that you have planned for the work that you're going to be doing beyond NOVA. So if you could just in general speak a little bit more on what you plan to do with your partnership that you mentioned.
Yeah, so right now we have partnered with Water First, and they are our first main source for any donations to be directed for our project. And they are providing us with information. So with World Water Day, to help us with some key information. And we want to continue working with other charities across Canada that are focusing on the water crisis, not only to educate ourselves, but to spread awareness about what they're doing and work together collaboratively to really raise awareness and see if we can do something beyond our awareness aspect at one point. But Water First is our beginning.
Awesome, that sounds really interesting.
Thank you.
If no one has any other questions at this point, we can go to the next part of the presentation. Although the Water Warriors do have, as mentioned, a public website and public social media. So if anyone else does have further comments or anything like that, obviously please follow them and you can message them on there as well.
I think there's one question in the chat. I'll let the team answer it before we move on.
I can speak on this. So the question is, how are you going to use social media to spread awareness? So the posts we've created have very basic information right now, but we're going to go deeper into that and to really educate people. So we want people to spread out the information and share it so everyone can learn more about it. But the information is already available on our website as well. so people can learn more there.
Awesome. And yeah, you guys are getting some comments as well. It is a very important issue to tackle. I think not just like within your group, but just as all of us, as most of us are probably Canadian citizens as well. So thank you guys for spreading awareness on this topic and for all the work that you guys are doing. Yeah, and that wraps up our 4 teams presentations. So we're going to get into the second half, or like last minutes of our symposium for today. So I'll pass it on to Intisal.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to these wonderful presentations and learning about everyone's research. We would now like to just super quickly announce the raffle winner. So the entries had been entered into an online generator. The winner was randomly selected. So I'll just quickly go ahead and announce the winner. And the winner of our raffle for this year, or for this event, is David Sun. Thank you for supporting us and with your donation, and thank you for everyone else who participated in our raffle as well. We will contact you after this with more details.
Yeah. And we would like to start closing off today's celebration by acknowledging everyone who helped make this fellowship possible. So we'll start off with the mentors who have worked closely and tirelessly with fellows in every step of their project. So we'd like to thank Lucas, Ava, Isabel, Chris, Moody, Elizabeth, Azteca, and Jamin for their help with the fellows and their projects. And then we'd like to thank our workshop speakers for leading the workshops and allowing our fellows to really learn something new and engage in insightful discussions. So thank you to Jen He, Ritu Joshi, Professor Azar Eftikari, Dr. Zubin Master, Professor Clinton Cuzio, and Fatima Sheikh.
And just a quick shout out to our volunteer team as well. Everyone listed over here on this page helped us a lot in the planning and organization before the fellowship even launched, helped us promote it, helped us get the word out, helped us organize all the events that we ran. So yeah, just a huge thank you to everyone on our volunteer team.
And we also want to thank our advisors and sponsors for this event. Our 2 advisors from the Music Therapy Academy, Rachel and Anna Lee, as well as our 2 advisors from ZipGrow, Tyler and Angus. So thank you so much for mentoring our teams on the specific topics, as well as our sponsors who help make this possible, Youth Action Now and Rising Youth.
And finally, our 24 fellows who did such a great job presenting all of their research and hard work today. Thank you guys for being our first cohort in this fellowship program. Honestly, this fellowship is not possible without you, and we had a great time spending the past 5 months with you. So bear with me, I'm going to read through all of the names. So I'd like to thank Aaron, Abdullah, Nushe, Ariba, Charmi, Cindy, Daksh, Dana, Alina, Emily, Fez, Lana, Marison, Maron, Natalie, Quinn, Richard, Ruby, Stephen, Servi, Thomas, Tia, and Zaina. Thank you guys all for really just showing us what amazing students you guys are, and really just bringing this amazing energy to our team.
Awesome. And for more information on how to get involved next year, you can check out our social medias, which are just NOVA X Network, and also our website is up to date with all information.
Just as everyone is wrapping up, and as we wrap up, we also wanted to announce that as we are closing off this year's fellowship, we are going to start organizing and planning for next year. So the Google form that you see here, which will be sent into the chat in a second, has a couple of different brainstorm topics for next year's fellowship. So you can go ahead and vote on those if you would like to provide insight on the topics that people research next year. In addition to that, you can also submit your own topics if you'd like to see us look into a topic further with our next cohort. So yeah, we will send that into the chat in a second, but yeah, you guys can get involved with the planning of our next fellowship. And yep, there's the form.
Yep. So feel free to open up the form and submit any ideas you may have. We'd love to see all of them and hopefully implement them with next year's cohort. And with that, I think that wraps up our entire symposium. We want to thank you guys so much for attending and everyone who really has just made this possible. This, like we mentioned earlier, this was our first time running this fellowship program. It was a really big project and it was very big ambition, but we were so proud to make this possible. And wow, 5 months really goes by so quickly, but we're so excited to see what you guys are going to achieve in the future based on just how well you guys work so well in this fellowship program. So thank you guys so much. Feel free and also stay connected with us on all of our social media pages.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep, so you guys are free to leave now. We'll stop the recording here. But yeah, thank you guys so much. We appreciate all of you attending.